It may look like a little thing, but it's actually super, super important. So one of the challenges I often see you guys make in your findings chapters is that you essentially choose to bury some of your most interesting and most actionable and most specific findings under something that feels pretty general and abstract and generic, and it's just not clear how it's supposed to be actionable. It's not clear what the implications are. So essentially what you're doing is you're making it difficult for your reader to understand the value of your study, and it's definitely not something that you want to be doing. And I'll give you some much more specific examples in a second, but first let's just very briefly go over and establish what is it that you really want to achieve from your study in general, from your thematic framework specifically, and also from your with your findings chapter, of course, that somebody will be reading. So I do have lots of videos in which I explain how to develop a thematic framework and what to do and what not to do, so feel free to watch them now. But one of the things that I often say is that the findings have to be actionable, they have to be specific, and that's one of the key criteria also for me, not just when developing and designing the thematic framework, but at the stage of data analysis as well. So I did explain in the past that when I'm analyzing the data and I'm trying to decide, for example, what to keep and what not to keep in my my final themes and sub-themes, that factor is one of the things I consider, how actionable and how specific these things are. Because if you think about any study in any field, almost, because yeah, I am aware that maybe there are some highly theoretical and philosophical studies, but usually if you're talking about nurses' experiences, if you're talking about doctors' experiences, teachers, students, maybe some situation, a specific situation, usually what is it that you're trying to achieve? Of course, you're usually trying to solve some problem, some sort of a problem, and usually you're trying to contribute with some ideas for how to solve that problem. Again, it's not universal. It's not this cannot be said about every single study, of course, but usually in a vast majority of studies, if you think about it, that's the goal. You want to make a change, essentially make a change. So to make a change, what do you need? Do you need something extremely vague and abstract, or do you need to tell somebody how to go about making that change? And it's of course the latter. So usually in some form or another, you're trying to develop some sort of guidelines, some sort of policies. So again, to influence policy change, to develop some guidelines for some desired and good practices for students, teachers, for institutions, for leaders. So that's usually what you're trying to do. So again, as I said, when I analyze the data, usually that's one of my criteria. So is this actionable? Is it detailed enough? That's one of the things. I often talk about thematic frameworks being like a table of contents, where you have to list the sub-themes, every sub-theme, every topic, everything you're finding in the data and everything you want to mention from that data. Make sure that you're listing that. So that's the thing. And then I'm thinking, is it actionable? Is it something abstract? Can somebody benefit from just looking at this sub-theme, reading this, and then understanding, okay, so that's what I need to do to make that change or to improve that practice. And when you apply this to the way you present the findings, it's exactly the same situation. You need to make sure that it's clear to the reader how somebody can benefit, because of course later you also have to talk about the implications. That's another reason. And as a student, of course, your main reader in mind will be your supervisor and maybe some additional external examiner. So it's a little bit different, but if you really try to think, a bit forward into the future, and think about that group, that target group, so your nurses, your doctors, your leaders, you should think, how can they benefit from it? Am I making it clear for everybody how they can benefit? But even at this kind of micro, local scale of your university, you at least should be thinking about, can they see how much work I put into this? Can they see how detailed my analysis was, and how good, and valid these findings are? And again, if you're forcing your findings to one or two general overarching themes, you're definitely not helping yourself or your readers. Don't forget to check out my ebook entitled Scholar's Guide to AI-Assisted Thematic Analysis, which is a useful resource for thematic analysis, whether you do plan to use AI or not. It contains plenty of useful advice, step-by-step instructions for thematic analysis, and a list of prompts that you can copy and paste into ChatGPT. So now to give you an example of what exactly I mean. So what happens very often is that I go into your findings or somebody findings chapter, and then I see, let's imagine again the study of nurses experiences. That's what we want to know, lived experiences of nurses. And I'm starting to read that chapter, and I read this general concept of resilience. So the first thing I read, for example, is that you found this is the key theme, basically. That's my findings, resilience. That's the first red flag, and I'm thinking, how is it so? How is that? So how can resilience be something that's answering everything that you just wanted to know? You wanted to know about their experiences, you wanted to improve their experiences, potentially. How can we talk about resilience being this one finding? But let's find out. So I start reading, and then what I usually find more often than not is that you do have plenty of interesting findings there. You do have plenty of interesting and actionable and specific and practical findings. So this means that what you've essentially done is that you kind of made a full circle, you've coded it right, you've analyzed it right, and then eventually you blend it all into this one general concept, thinking that that's, you know, the desired and the perfect format for your findings. So imagine that I'm reading that section, and what I'm reading is that nurses often struggle with lack of support from their superiors, from their leadership, from the institution. They also struggle from all sorts of things, so stress and anxiety and conflicts with the patients themselves and patients' families, all sorts of things, and lack of support. So what they do, they develop this resilience. They develop this resilience through external support, so let's say psychological help, and also families, and also reading, and also self-care and meditation, and all sorts of things. So your conclusion is that, yes, we're talking about resilience. It's a big thing in this data, which is right and is accurate. However, based on what I just said, on all these things I have read, why not make it more specific? Why not make it more obvious what we can do about this? So in my view, for example, based on what I just said, we can have, you know, a theme of challenges and barriers, where you would talk about external, you know, lack of external support, lack of institutional support, conflicts with the families, conflicts with the patients, all sorts of things. And then you have your facilitators, or maybe good practices, desired practices, maybe factors positively influencing their experience, where you could list external support, you could list self-care, you could list meditation, family support, and institutional support, all sorts of things. So you can see how much you've got in that data as you kind of delve into it, but yet you choose to call it, you know, something very general and abstract, just risking that maybe, you know, your readers won't understand it. Your readers will be confused, and they won't know exactly what you mean by this general term. And I'm definitely not saying that what I'm saying is right and what you're doing is wrong. Again, I can imagine it being the case in many studies, that maybe the whole point is to be a little bit more theoretical, but I hope that you get my point, especially in the context where you have to be specific, even if it's just for, like I said, to satisfy the supervisors, the examiners, to show that you've done a lot of work. But then, like I said, most importantly, if you actually want to make a difference, make a change, then that's another reason why you want to be specific. So like I said, usually you do have all of that in your findings. So once I start reading, you're telling me so many different things. And my advice is just list all these things, everything that I'm reading about. It has to be clear in that thematic framework. So remember, it's like a table of contents, your thematic framework. So anything that has to be said, that there is to be said, needs to be clear in that thematic framework. Otherwise, I'm reading that and I'm constantly asking myself, where is that? So where is that support? Where is that meditation? Where is that these conflicts with the families? Where is it in that general, let's say, figure that you're showing me, where there's only resilience and maybe two other general concepts? And finally, if you really insist, if you really see that as being something that's underlying your data, or maybe this kind of overarching theme, then usually my advice is how to utilize it is to put it in the discussion chapter, because that's a chapter where you may kind of put something that's maybe not something that was explicitly said by the participants, but it's more of your own interpretation of what you feel all of it is kind of telling us. So you're inferring that information. So it just fits that chapter better, and you know what to, at least now you solve the problem of what to put in the discussion chapter, which, as you know, is also a very vague and difficult chapter to write. I do have some videos about that chapter specifically, and at the same time you made sure that your findings, your results chapter is a clear report, because that's what it is. It's a report of your findings, in which you're reporting in a very clear and practical and specific way what was found in the data, because that's the main goal of your findings, to make that report, to make sure that your reader knows about your data as much as you do. So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I hope that you learned something new. Please like the video if you did. Feel free to comment, ask me questions, make comments. I always try to respond as fast as possible. And if you require a more detailed, more tailored personal assistance, feel free to explore services that I offer, including Zoom tutorials.